Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about PPR, or Principal Private Residence Relief. What is it? What can you do with it? Hi, I'm Kimberly Shapcott, qualified chartered accountant, property investor and entrepreneur. Let's sit down and have a chat. Private Property Relief, or PPR as I refer to it, is all to do with your personal private residence. It's something that is a relief available to all UK individuals, and we're going to go into a bit more detail about how it applies so that you understand what it is. In another video, you'll be able to see how you can make this work for you as a property investor, a property developer. But let's look at the basics of what is it and how does it work. The relief works by the fact that normally if you are buying and selling property, or dwellings as it's termed, you would have to pay capital gains tax. But that's slightly different when it's your own home. So why is that? The PPR relief gives you the option and the opportunity to not have to pay any capital gains tax on the property that is treated as your main residence, which is great news because you can buy your own home, sell it, make a gain hopefully on the property over the longer term, and then move into another property and not have to worry about paying any capital gain tax at the 18, the 28, or the different rates. It's irrelevant, you don't care because you've got PPR relief. There are a few criteria we need to be aware of for PPR so that you are aware of how it fits together, and it only applies to your main residence. Now, your main residence could be your house, your garden, even a bit of land with the property. However, there are a few limitations and we just need to cover those so you understand how it works for you as an individual. You'll be entitled to the full relief if it is your only or main dwelling, your main home, that you've not had a period of absence that might need to be discounted from any calculations, that the garden is within a permitted area and no part of the property has been used solely for business use exclusively. You may have a home office, but it's not exclusively for business use, it's actually used for other things. You just use it for business as part of its use within the home. If you meet those requirements or conditions, then no capital gains tax to pay. If, however, you only partially meet them, then you may be able to limit any capital gains tax that you may be liable to pay, which at least helps reduce the bill. One thing to note at this point is if you make a loss, then you can't use that loss either. So it's a great relief, but if you make a loss or a gain, it's completely ignored, which you might think, oh, but I want to use it. No, sorry, losses on a property which is your main residence and has PPR relief on, again, you can't use that loss anywhere else. So who does the relief apply to? Well, it's for any individual in the UK has this relief available to them. Unfortunately, if you're married, you only get one property between the two of you. However, if you do separate, you can again have a property each. So it's just something to be aware of, especially if you're getting together with somebody, you've both got your own properties, that's fine. Then as you become a married couple, you would only have one that is allowable for the PPR relief. Let's just briefly mention what we mean by a dwelling house. So this is a property, a house. It can have a garage, a garden. It can even have outbuildings. So it can be a substantial sort of property. The key thing here is that they're all used as part of the home. So you just really need to watch with any outbuildings whether they would fit into the PPR relief or not. One thing we find these days is people sometimes have more than one property, which is great. That's what we do as property investors. However, that does create the problem of which is your main residence. So if you have one or more properties, you will have to nominate which one is your main residence. The key thing here is that you have to show that that property is your main residence. So you can't just say, oh, I live there, and they talk to a neighbour and go, oh, nobody lives next door. You can't have it that all your post goes to one address, but you're saying your main residence is a different address, because the evidence would suggest otherwise. So if it is your main residence, you need to be living there, you need to have your post there, people need to see you that you are actually living in the property. So it's just something to be aware of if you have multiple dwellings and multiple houses, and making that determination of which is your main residence. So how is the period of ownership classified? So the period of ownership starts on the day you purchase the property, which is not an issue. And then the end of the ownership, the date that you actually sell it. Now that whole period classifies as your period of ownership, and if you have been there all the time, PPR relief would be fine for the whole period. If, however, you haven't, then we may need to apportion that period to look at when you did actually live in that property. One crucial thing that the government have provided is the last 18 months of the ownership of a property is automatically classified as allowable for PPR relief. So if you do happen to move house and you've not quite sold your property for whatever reason and it follows through, you would still be able to get the PPR relief even during that last little period that you might not have actually been living there. So that's great news if you are kind of moving things around in that period. If you've not been in that property for the whole of the period, how it works is you would apportion it. So let's say you've owned a property for 15 years, but you had a period where in 5 years you moved out and then maybe moved back in because you relocated for a short period of time. So you would look at that period and go, I've had 5 years there, 5 years not there, and 5 years there. So we'd have 10 over 15, or 2/3 of the period would be allowable for PPR relief and 1/3 would not, depending what you had done in that period. Which nicely leads me on to accommodation which you have because of your job. So if you have to relocate because of your job and you've maintained your main residence, but you're living somewhere else because of a job-related reason, then that period that you are living in your job-related accommodation would still classify for PPR in that period of your main residence. So you don't lose out by the sheer fact you've got to move somewhere else for your job and then come back again. So that's great news if you are moving around with your work. The final thing I want to mention today is about a permitted area, your gardens. So normally your garden would fit into your property and it would be included within the PPR relief. However, if you've got larger gardens or outdoor areas, we need to consider a few elements. The permitted area that the government has said is that you're allowed 1/2 hectare as allowable for garden purposes. However, you do need to look at the property that you're looking at. If you've got a larger property, it may be that it would be expected to have larger grounds, so therefore it may still fall within the PPR relief. However, if it's just a very large piece of land with a small house on, then you may not be able to get the PPR relief on the whole of the grounds. So it's just something to be aware of and look at to see how it all fits together. And especially if you're looking at doing new build projects where you're trying to separate the land out, you just need to consider, if it's your own property, how the PPR relief would work, as there may be capital gains on selling off some of the garden or splitting some of the garden to do a development. Hopefully today you've discovered what PPR is and how you can make use of it. And check out the future video where we're going to look at how you can make the best use of this relief available to you. Let me know any stories you've had where you've not been able to claim it, and let's see what we can actually do to try and help others make this work for them. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and let's make tax less taxing.